Zach Van Valkenburg opts to come back for another year. Of course, he's a junior college transfer, really stepped in nicely last year. Just seemed to be a guy who was at the right place at the right time constantly, had a strips, forced fumble and a fumble recovery against Northwestern. Had a really nice, I think it was considered an interception / fumble recovery, whatever it was determined against Nebraska late in the year. He's going to be the leader on that defensive line. They lose Davion Nixon. They lose Chauncey Golston. They lose Jack Heflin, who was a transfer from Northern Illinois, and they lose Austin Schulte, two guys I thought could have easily chose to come back. Surprised neither of them did. But Alex, we'll go to you here. You look at defensive line. It starts, I think, on the inside because you are losing a lot with Heflin, Nixon, and Schulte. Are you comfortable right now with Noah Shannon? He's a guy who has played a lot, but now he's going to have to step into a full-time role, I think, at tackle, and they're going to rotate guys out, but I would call this still full-time, along with probably Y.A. Black. I mean, I think we're going to see a rotation at the other tackle spot with Logan Lee, maybe even Logan Jones. But your thought on the interior of that defensive line?
How do you say Black's first name?
I believe it's Y.A. I used to say Yaya. I used to say Yaya, but I believe it's Y.A.
Y.A. Okay.
Y.A.
I mean, I'd say he's a bit of a question mark probably, but I feel pretty good overall. I usually don't worry too much about, well, the only part of the Iowa defense I worry about is the secondary, to be honest. It seems like they always do well. Of course, you are losing guys like you mentioned from last year, but I feel good, not great, but I think they'll be solid.
So how big is it to lose Nixon Noah? I mean, obviously it's huge because he was one of the better players on the team last year. Physically was domineering, which is a good thing in football. And you lose a lot of size with Heflin and Schulte leaving. So what's your biggest concern with the defensive line at this point? Is it having depth or is it replacing the size and experience of the aforementioned couple? One guy in that list was a transfer, a grad transfer, and the other guy was, a multi-year regular player and not a starter, not a multi-year starter, but a multi-year contributor in Nixon.
I think the biggest thing to me at this point is the experience that they lost and the guys that are there. Because according to this depth chart, at least, you've got Black, who's a redshirt freshman, starting. Now, again, that speaks well of him, that he's going to play well and beat out a redshirt sophomore for that spot. But, it's his first year playing. So
he did play last year a little bit. He's a redshirt freshman because I don't believe he played more than 4 games. Even if he had, he gets an extra year because of COVID. COVID year didn't count.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think he met his 5. I don't think he went past his 4 games played, but he did play. He's a big number 94. Kind of reminds you of Epinesa, a little bit bigger as far as, Epinesa was very long. I'm not trying to compare him there, but it kind of reminds you of him when you see him on the field. So, but he did get some playing time last year.
Okay.
All right. So again, Logan Jones, Logan Lee, there's 2 guys there who I think you're going to see the field as far as not guys who are starters. I think, is it Chris Reams? Do you see him on the list? He's not listed on the depth chart I'm looking at.
I do see him. He's listed as the 3rd right defensive end.
Have heard good things about Chris. Don't know if he'll, has he taken a step back? Is that why we're not seeing on the depth chart? But I think ideally you'd like to see Lee, Jones, Reams, Van Valkenburg.
See, on this,
Shannon.
He's listed behind Deontay Craig.
Okay. All right. So, I thought maybe he'd be playing more tackle. Again, they're going to like to flip guys around. But yeah, then you get Wagner, who's I think a starter, along with Joe Evans, who's kind of that pass rush hybrid type defensive end. Yeah, you could potentially get 8 guys. I think Kelvin Bell and Phil Parker would like 8 guys. And I said it a couple weeks ago, as far as my biggest needs for fall football for Iowa, one of those was getting your defensive line ready for these first 2 weeks, because these first 2 weeks you feature Brock Purdy, who's a guy who can scramble, and Michael Penix Jr., who's a guy who can also scramble. So you're going to need plenty of defensive linemen who are ready for scrambling threats. And I think depth at defensive line is huge for Iowa to be able to be ready for that, Noah.
So I will say one thing. I wasn't really paying attention because I noticed something about this. I kept missing the name Logan Jones, and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't seeing him. He's listed as injured on the depth chart, right? Have you heard anything about that?
No. Why don't you Google that? I have not heard anything about Logan Jones being injured. And maybe I'm off in left field. While you're doing that, let's talk about the ends real quick, Alex. And John Wagner is a big guy who I could see playing more tackle at times. Joe Evans is, again, not your typical size defensive end at 6'2", 248, but certainly a smart guy, a former quarterback from Ames. And then Van Valkenburg is an experienced guy. Deontay Craig's kind of a new face to the depth chart, but you lose Chauncey Golston, who put in a lot of work at Iowa. How comfortable are you with the defensive ends right now?
I think it's kind of the same deal. I feel good, not great. I think they're going to be solid. I'm not, I think we've got spoiled with ends in the past where you can have a real difference maker like Epinesa, but I think these guys will be solid. It seems like Iowa always has somebody who kind of stands out at that position every year, even when you don't have an obvious front runner going in. So I'm excited to see who that's going to be this year.
I think the obvious guy who's going to stand out, I mean, you can look at if you're looking at tackle, that may be a different discussion. But I think if you're looking at the most obvious guy to stand out at end is certainly Zach Van Valkenburg, and a lot of preseason award lists. And, again, not the biggest of guys. I mean, he's listed right now as, 6'4", 267. He's not a small guy by any means. I think he's gotten bigger. He's gotten stronger since he's been at Iowa. But I think he's going to be the leader of that group. And if he can take that next step forward to where he's developed, the swim move, the bull rush, look at tape of AJ Epinesa. I mean, he was there with Epinesa when he first got here. So he knows what it takes to be elite at this level. And certainly Chauncey Golston, I think you could say he was an elite defensive end at the collegiate level. So Zach Van Valkenburg, again, physically, does he have the attributes of an AJ Epinesa? Probably not. But when you pair him with guys like Chris Reams, John Wagner, Joe Evans, I think the tight end position is fine. Health is going to be big. We saw last year Schulte missed time. Heflin missed time. I might be missing other guys. But, injuries are part of football, but I think defensive line depth, again, is going to be huge, especially early. Okay. Linebacker. Let's move on to linebacker. Noah, did you figure anything out? You were doing some research on something. What were you looking up?
The Logan Jones.
Find anything at all?
No, I haven't found anything yet. I'm seeing a few things here and there, but I can't find any details. It's like every time I try to click on a website to look at a news article or maybe some tweet or something, it's like referenced in the Google search, but then I go to that webpage and I can't find anything about it. It's really weird. But he's listed as an injured reserve on the depth chart.
Well, again, I don't know how much we can put stock in our lads. Anyways, let's look at linebacker. All right. Linebacker was a position, I think it's fair to say. Linebacker was a position last year where, injuries hurt early. I mean, you look at what happened in the Purdue game, Barrington Wade getting isolated on an island, giving up a crucial touchdown to David Bell, who, again, Iowa should never be matching up a linebacker with David Bell. But Jack Campbell and Seth Benson were both hurt early. I believe one of them had mono, I'm not mistaken. I could be mixing that up with a defensive lineman, but I believe one of those guys had mono. When they came back, it was totally different. Iowa linebackers are in a great spot right now with Benson and Campbell. But again, Justin Jacobs is probably the third guy. After Jacobs, I don't know who you turn to. Do you turn to a guy like Mike Trim, who's listed? Jay Higgins is there as well. I kind of see that. This is a team, maybe not quite as much depth at a few positions as normal, but I think strong at all positions, right? So I think injuries are going to be a key here. But as it relates to linebacker, again, you're going to need a strong. You've got a tremendous running back coming. You're going to be facing off against in week 2, and some experience in the defensive line. So boy, and Brian Ferentz, offensive coordinator, had huge complimentary words for Campbell here just a few days ago. So I'm comfortable at linebacker. I know I'm saying that kind of for every position, but the depth is the key. Where will we be after fall camp with depth? If these guys, and I'm talking about Mike Trim, I'm talking about Jay Higgins, go over to defensive line, I'm talking about Deontay Craig, I'm talking about Lucas Van Ness, who we didn't mention. If any of those guys or all of those guys can develop, look out, because Iowa becomes good and deep if that happens. Not saying it will, but if that happens, look out. Your thoughts on linebacker, Noah, given what we saw early last year and the struggles when they were down guys.
Okay. Again, I have been sorry to say this, but I have been tuning you out. I finally found something.
You should be sorry you're saying that. You should be sorry.
From 20 months ago.
On Logan Lee?
On Logan Jones.
Logan Jones, excuse me.
Apparently, he had a very bad leg injury. It says 20 months ago, which would put it, the end of, just before COVID, right?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
So, it's not a tweet, but something similar to it. Somebody posted that Lystico said on his podcast that Logan Jones had a serious leg injury around that time and wouldn't be back for fall. But that's 2 years ago. So why would he be on the injured reserve?
Couple things. Probably just an outdated thing from our lads. Second thing, that's impressive research. The fact that you just pulled that out from 20 months ago, some random note from a podcast from Chad Lystico at Des Moines Register is impressive. Okay, linebacker. Since Noah kind of changed his subject, we'll head over to Alex. You saw Iowa struggle without Campbell and without Benson. Where are you at the linebacker position?
I'm a little bit more, I don't want to say I'm concerned, I guess, but
what are we concerned about, though? Depth? I hope you're saying depth. You're not concerned about the overall talent, are you? With those 3 guys at the helm with Benson and Campbell. And again, you're playing more cash, so you're playing more 2 linebacker as opposed to 3.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. I'm confident in those guys. But those positions, you don't have a ton of backup experience and talent. So, there could be issues there, but it's kind of in the middle again. It's not an area that I'm super confident in, and I tend to have confidence year to year with Phil Parker, and the Iowa defense just always seems to come up with guys.
And speaking of coming up with guys, Dane Belton was a saving grace for this team a couple of years back when they lost Amani Hooker and they took their shot with DJ Johnson at cash. That didn't really work out. He transferred away, and now Dane Belton has really latched onto that position. But I think a guy who's comfortable playing safety if need be. So you're either going to get Justin Jacobs or Dane Belton out there, and I think Iowa fans should be excited about either of those guys. Backup, as far as cash, we don't really know. Is it Matt Hankins? Is it Riley Moss? Of course, you take away one of your, two best defenders overall if you send one of those guys down into that catch set. I don't think we need to say much about Dane Belton. I think people should, we kind of know what to expect. He's going to be really solid. I like the 4.25, especially given some of the talent we talked about. Freifogel at Indiana last week in the podcast. We know that Minnesota, their star receiver Ottman Bell right now is dealing with a serious leg injury, or I believe a serious leg injury. So don't know where he's going to be at. But Iowa's going to have to face skill position talent, and of course, Iowa State always has skill position talent. So they're going to need Dane Belton.